speaker, Justin Zigner. His wife is Krista, and they have 3 children, and she's home watching the children right now. And I might say his mother's here tonight. Judy is here tonight, over in the corner, sitting in front of Danny. So glad to have you here, Judy. Okay, I'll turn the meeting over to Justin. You do that.
Test. Nope. Test.
No.
Test now.
Come
Then come on. Oh, there it was. There we go. Okay. Make sure to project. Oh yes, you're going to turn off the lights. You wanted to turn the lights off. Now you got to turn the lights off. Okay. While Marilyn's getting to the lights, I want to introduce myself real quick. I'm Justin Zigner. I'm the Deputy Commander at the American Legion here at Elizabethville. And I offered to do a little presentation ahead of Veterans Day on local veterans, our local veterans associations, and how the relationship is between the community they serve and the service that they had. So, local veterans, the community they serve. A brief overview. Is it kind of thing? Oh, okay. Well, my alignment isn't exactly what I'd hoped for. So, going to scrape on my beard. Just got to be careful. All right, I figure if you're going to go back in history, you should really try and find the beginning of things. And unfortunately, I didn't find a whole lot of good information about any relationship between the local residents here during the Revolutionary War. There are 2 monuments in local cemeteries, one in Hill Church and one on the Crossroads Church, about revolutionary volunteers who formed up in militia elements. And as far as I can tell, at least local historians have kind of summarized it as they walked around, they camped a lot, and then they came home. So if anybody was wondering how far back we can go, this is about as far back as we can go. There is a one Revolutionary War veteran placard at the Old Stone Church Cemetery. But my research suggests that it's not placed at the correct grave, and if you've ever been to that cemetery, you know that a lot of the graves are in a lot of very degraded state. So it may be a challenge to figure out who that veteran actually was. Oopsie. Okay, let's try again. The GAR. Does anybody know what the GAR is? Just yell it out if you know.
Grand Army of the Republic.
I figured this audience would have that right at the tip of their tongue. Yes, Grand Army of the Republic. If this were a different audience, I'd have stumped them already. I like audience participation. So the Grand Army of the Republic. Yes, there were a number of local veterans that participated in Civil War activities. One of them, Jonas Schwab. Those of you who are familiar with local history, very familiar with Jonas Schwab. He was part of the 210th Pennsylvania Infantry, and as far as I can tell, that unit was present at the Confederate surrender at Appomattox Courthouse, as well as a few other notable battles. Another local veteran from that area is Amos McCauley. He was part of the 9th Pennsylvania Cavalry. He was part of Sherman's March to the Sea. There is a bit of local lore associated with another veteran, John Hoover. He apparently lied about his age to enlist at 15. And while apparently there's a good bit of embellishment for patriotic purposes back in the day. So a number of, because of his young age during the war, and the interest in having patriotic stories, people would write stories about young enlistees, young privates. And so there were a few stories written back in the post-war era about brave Johnny Hoover, who was a drummer boy who picked up a rifle and fought for the Union. As far as we can tell, there wasn't a whole lot of truth to this, but he also lived to 1933 and didn't go out of his way to correct the record. So maybe he enjoyed it, maybe he didn't want the notoriety. There is another another local veteran, Hiram Schramm, or Schramm, because back in those days people decided to change the spelling of their last name. He was part of the 28th Pennsylvania Regular Volunteers. He participated in over a dozen battles during the war, including the capture of Atlanta. He is also the great-grandfather of Ned Weaver, who we'll touch on a little bit. After the Civil War, what happened when the veterans came back? When the war was over, the armistice was signed, the veterans came home and they formed mutual aid societies. One of them, if those of you familiar with Lycans, you've probably driven through, seen the GAR building. That was a veterans association for aged veterans, and also the auxiliary helped start the decorating of veterans' graves. This was leading up towards the official recognition of Memorial Day, so this was really where that tradition started. Not necessarily just locally, but it happened around the country at the same time. Moving on. Before World War I think this isn't really a local thing, but it kind of sets the stage about where we were nationally. There were a number of the veterans organizations. They were really kind of focused on their veterans, but there was also the country was changing at these times. There was a recognition that America, as it was changing, might be drawn into World War I, which they didn't call World War I at that point. They didn't think there would be a World War II, but there was a push by several notable veterans. General Leonard Wood, those of you familiar with the military, you might have heard of Fort Leonard Wood, named after that general, and former President Teddy Roosevelt, for a bigger effort at a national level to prepare America for future military conflict. This was called the preparedness movement. And I think it's really overlooked as far as setting the stage for America's future military efforts. So the preparedness movement, they laid out a position that our nation's military wasn't ready for a modern war. Our industrial base wasn't prepared for it. Our military wasn't professional. America itself wasn't a cohesive nation. We had a lot of recent immigrants, a lot of people who had divided loyalties between the old country and America. What they called themselves, or they didn't call themselves necessarily, but they would refer to themselves as German Americans, Italian Americans. The term that the preparedness movement used was hyphenated Americans. So they pushed this idea of 100% Americanism as a national goal. And those of you who happen to have taken one of those American Legion flyers, in the front of there, if you can look in the small print, there's a preamble to the Constitution of the American Legion, and the phrase 100% Americanism is in there. It comes back to the preparedness movement. They also wanted to professionalize the military by having a bunch of summer camps for military officers and interested parties to get them prepared for the rigors of drill, ceremony, military preparedness, which took off in some ways, and in other ways it didn't work very well. So these, what are they called, the Plattsburgh camps, they weren't that successful, and in hindsight it was seen as very prescient. Something else that was happening at the same time as the preparedness movement, in a more local sense, a number of organizations also seized upon this idea of there are a bunch of recent immigrants here coming from Europe who didn't have full loyalty to America. They didn't see America as their home. They kept with their clans, they kept with their people, they kept with their original language. So two of those organizations that were active in the Valley were the Oddfellows. Have you ever heard of the Oddfellows before? The Oddfellows, and then the Patriotic Order of the Sons of America. It's a mouthful, but otherwise known as the POS of A. The POS of A, actually, if you go back up the hill a little bit, they are the organization that built the big pavilion up in the park. They have a nice sign that says POS of A. They weren't a veterans organization, but they advanced two ideas. They were, I don't know if you would call them anti-immigrant or pro-assimilation. The politics of the day don't always match with the politics of today, so I try to keep things in context as much as I can. But they also were very supportive of free education. They thought government schools, public schools were significant and very important for the advancement of America. So if you ever happen to be going around in the graveyards around town and you happen to see a POS of a placard, which looks very, very much like one of the military grave markers, you'll see a shield that says FE, that stands for free education. And that was so prominent they put it right there on the front of their markers. So, oopsie. This photo I stumbled upon last night. I thought it was very interesting. It's really hard to read, so I'll try and summarize it for you. World War I kicks off. America's entry to World War I kicks off. And there's an effort to get a bunch of, to recruit many locals into military units. One of the things they did was they had public recruitment events, and they kind of made a public spectacle. If you could think about this is before radio, this is before television, internet, and there's no good video games. So anytime there was something to go and look at to get out of your house, you probably enjoyed the heck out of it. So this, there was a newspaper article that associated with this that said that this is a Harrisburg-based recruitment drive, went up and down the valley and held drill and ceremony exercises for the public to witness and participate with. And actually the Cub Scouts and the Boy Scouts at that time would play along, and for a couple of hours they would entertain themselves watching people stand, turn, march, do some exercises, and then they just carry on. And this is apparently like a traveling road show for them. I thought it was rather interesting because the idea of people standing in line probably wouldn't draw nearly the same crowd as it would today. Slides are out of order. That's okay.
Do you know where this location would be in Elizabethville, by chance? I can't make it out.
Where did we say that we thought this would be?
Isn't that a church steeple in the back?
I believe this might be what the current Broad Street is. Around that area, that's my guess. It says it was staged at the park, but this was before the park was the park.
Right. Okay.
So that's my best guess. I'm sure if we did, I didn't have the time to do the research for the actual location, but I thought this was I don't think it's the elementary school, although that's an excellent guess. I think it would be weird to have a barn with a steeple, but I think that might be the Salem UCC Church. Okay. So, World War I. Where did that go? Nope. Nope. We're just going to have to do this live. Okay, so World War I, approximately, I don't know, nope, that's a terrible way of doing things. We'll do it over this way. Gonna get the lights real quick. I'll pause.
Is that too bright?
This will be good for what we need it for. So, one thing I wanted to show off with the World War I, there was approximately 90 local men who signed up for military service during World War I. If you can think about the number of families in Elizabethville at the time, that represented a pretty substantial contribution for manpower. Of these 90-ish local men, 3 were killed in battle. There's if you look under here, you can see there's some stars by those names, but I'm not going to do an eye test right now for you, but I can read them all. One was a gentleman by the name of Lloyd Chupp. He was killed in the Battle of Meuse-Argonne, which was one of the deadliest battles in World War I. It was towards the end of World War I, and approximately 26,000 American troops died during that offensive in only 50 days. There's subject to regular artillery, regular mustard gas attacks. So he died a little bit before the end of the conflict. There's another gentleman by the name of John Hummel. We'll talk a little bit more about John Hummel when we get to World War II as well, because there's an interesting story associated with that. But John Hummel, again, just like that, the gentleman in the Civil War lied about his age to join up. He was actually 16 when he was killed in France as a bicycle messenger for General Pershing. So he was according to family history, he died during a nighttime artillery strike while he was delivering a message. And there's another guy, Harry Bechtel. And Harry Bechtel was unfortunately, those of you who know your military history dates, he was wounded critically on November 10th, 1918, one day before the armistice. And he suffered from his wounds, and he actually died 10 days later after the armistice occurred. So he was one of the final victims of the military conflict. He wasn't the last. There were a few others, but he was definitely one of the ones that happened. And this was a very violent and very heavy, casualty-inducing offensive towards the end of the war. So those are our three local killed in action from World War I. They were all relatively concentrated in the same units. If you could think of the world of World War I, there was this was before typewriters. This was before computers. A lot of that organization, very heavily involved in manpower. So you grab the people that are nearby and then you put them in the same unit. So almost everybody in the Pennsylvania and Northern Maryland region were all part of the 79th Infantry Division. You might see regimental insignia such as the 314th, 315th, those types of organizations. They're all underneath the 79th. So, what can I tell you about that I haven't told you already? Move this over here. Oh, yeah. So Armistice Day happens. People come back en masse, all together, from units that they were all part of together. So they knew one another. They fought, and they had this very similar experiences. And they came back to the same towns where they started from, and they formed organizations. One of them being the American Legion. The local American Legion chapter was formed as the John Lloyd Post, named after John Hummel and Lloyd Chubb. I don't know what Harry did to get on the outs, or maybe they just said, well, we can do 2 names, we can't do 3 names. Generally, the organizations are named after one particular veteran of note, and they decided, I guess they made an exception for this. We're one of the only posts in Pennsylvania that has a dual-named post. So, what are these social organizations for? Well, there was social cohesion. These people had gone through some things together. They had some people who were suffering from health issues because of the gas attacks, because of the impacts of the war, and there was a number of them in the area, and so social organizations were popular. It also marks kind of a downturn in the popularity of those other organizations, the Odd Fellows and the POS of 8. So it kind of supplants that. They put on activities. They supported local patriotic efforts and social activities that kind of drew the town together. Moving on. So what happened next? Well, I say time to regroup and reflect. One of the things that happened was a lot of these people, they didn't go to college, they didn't have a big organization that was different from their local town. But they were part of something bigger in the military. So there was a lot of, I bring this up, the 314th Infantry, this placard, this was donated to the Legion from a family member who was in the 314th Infantry Regiment. They would actually have reunions, annual reunions. They would have social lodges. These reunions would actually have they would have a bunch of things associated with them. They would have newsletters, yearbooks, banquets, dances, regalia, all these things that were added to the flourish and fanfare of a growing military culture. So these things were new. This is actually so new. You can see it says USNA. Does anybody know what USNA stands for? It's not the Naval Academy. It's okay. USNA stands for U.S. National Army. So the National Army, as distinct from the Army, was one of the precursor organizations to the National Guard. So they it was changed shortly after that, but they decided to keep that regalia for. Plus, somebody spent a lot of time cutting out felt, so they why waste the effort? So these reunions, these organizations, they kept up for a number of years, and as you can imagine, as time goes on, people age, they pass away. They kind of ended with the members of that organization. These organizations also were closely tied to the military units that were still active. So the 79th Infantry Division was still an active unit. It still had officers. Most of the enlisted had been discharged, but the officer corps continued to train. They would have summer camps, just like that the preparedness movement, just like our nowadays our National Guard would have summer training. I'm sorry. So every time I turn my head a certain way, I get a little pop on the microphone. Okay. World War II. Following the bombing of Pearl Harbor, massive amounts of people all throughout America joined up. You can see here and this, there's other pictures of this. I believe this was positioned in what's now the park somewhere. I'm not sure exactly where. But, this represents about 200 local men and maybe one or two women. That's a lot for a town with however many families that we had back in that. So if you can think about it, about 1 out of every 3 men in town was part of the World War II or World War I veteran themselves. That's a lot of participation. So the Veterans Associations at this time. Just pull it down, okay. I'll try and do it this way. I'm still gonna fit. All right. I'm just gonna hold the dang thing. If we do it like this, it will be better. So, what happened to the World War I veterans? Most of them had aged out of military service.
I don't know why that's doing.
Yeah, that's probably me. I'm probably slurring my speech.
No, I don't think so.
But most of these World War I veterans had aged out of military service, but they still wanted to participate in the war effort. And so what were they able to do? Well, there were a lot of things that this was a national effort to change the course of the war, end the war quickly. So there were war bonds. I'm sure we've all heard about war bonds. There were efforts to instill patriotism in our youth. So they would have essay and speaking contests. They were held by the local organizations. They would set up letter writing campaigns for deployed troops, care packages for the deployed people. The auxiliaries, the ladies' auxiliaries, would help out with any household chores or anything like that that the families who were left behind because of deployed military had to endure. So the veterans organizations become a central element of the community at this point, in a different way than before. It wasn't just inward facing, this was pointing out towards the entire community. Yada, yada, yada. World War II's over. The veterans from World War II, they're coming home same way the veterans from World War I came home. Not necessarily from the same units, they didn't all serve in the same units, but they did all come together. They came as a unit, they left as a unit. They spent months at sea, either coming from the Pacific or coming from the European theater. They had a chance to decompress as an organization around people. They associated with those people. They had a chance to get adjusted and acclimated to civilian life. They were ready. They were ready to get back into the real world, the regular world. But there were a whole lot more veterans, and at least in Elizabethville's sense, there was a need for even more veteran activity. So the VFW was opened up a post in town named after Paul Spiker, uncle of. You said you had 7 total.
There were 5 that fought were in World War II at the same time.
So 5 at the same time that fought in World War II. A lot of families had multiple members of their family in battle at the same time because of the nature of the war. One of the people was a brother of John Hummel, who was actually, he was 39 when he joined to go into World War II, and he was also killed in battle. But there were 2 other brothers in that family who were also in World War II. So, and just like if those of you who remember the movie Saving Private Ryan, when they had I think it was like, in that case, there were like 3 brothers that died in battle, and then like they searched after the 4th one. So this had a second brother, and then there were 2 others that were in active duty. They were removed from active duty towards non-combat roles. One was stationed in the Aleutian Islands in Alaska. One was stationed as a driver stateside somewhere for a colonel or something. So that's a little bit of our history there. Okay. Oopsie. A little touchy. Vietnam era. I don't mean to gloss over this military service between World War II and Vietnam, but if I hit on everything, we'd be here all night. We don't want that. So, U.S. involvement in World War I, about a year and a half, about 7 million people. In World War II, about 16 million people, 3.5 years across multiple theaters of engagement. Roughly the same time for about 3.5 years with the Korean War, but there were about 10% of the troops involved. Coming shortly after World War II, the scale of Korean conflict just didn't seem as significant. The world was eager to move past this wartime footing. So we kind of moved past to the next major milestone here is Vietnam. Vietnam, a lot more contentious. It also it had a mixed public opinion. We didn't quite understand why we were there. There's an active anti-war effort. There were anti-war efforts in all conflicts, including the Civil War and the Revolutionary War. But it was very prominent because of the national media involvement and all that. But the one thing that made the Vietnam War much different than all previous conflicts was it was an individual war. People went over on an airplane. They got assigned to a unit of people who might have been strangers, complete strangers the day before. And then when their tour was up, they got on an airplane, and 18 hours later, they're landing in America. They're back in the civilian world. They didn't have that month and a half of time on a boat to decompress, to play cards with their buddies, to talk through all the things that they had seen and experienced. So so there was a much different relationship between Vietnam era veterans and the general and their reintroduction to society than previous generations, previous wars. It was also protracted, it was 15 years. And there was no definitive end to the conflict that you could point and say, okay, we won, we're the good guys. So, the veterans who were coming back to America, maybe they were reached out to by the veterans organizations, like, hey, you're a veteran, come on, be part of our party, show up to our meetings and all that stuff. They didn't feel the same type of connection that the World War I veterans and the World War II veterans had. It was a much different experience. Now, there were a lot of them. We still have about the same number, percentage-wise, of veterans in the population because of the number of conflicts and that. So you don't see a great deal of decline in the participation of people in veterans organizations, but you do see a difference in the nature of the participation. So instead of having large banquets, large dances, and everybody being very social, it's a little bit more individualized. Those large scale activities kind of taper off a little bit, and they're more driven by the older members of those organizations rather than the younger members. Where are we at? Okay, 1975 to 2000, end of the Cold War. People didn't join the army to go and conquest, to beat the Nazis or smash the Japanese. They were mostly doing it to pay for college or because they have a lack of other career opportunities. It wasn't as noble or popular profession, although it was still respected in the community, but the numbers went down. This meant in the Cold War, you didn't need a significant military presence around the world, and we also had two significantly short and bloodless conflicts in Bosnia and Kuwait. It gave the impression that America was really way over stronger than the rest of the world as far as military goes. So this was kind of an ambiguous time. This is also a time when the aging of the World War II veterans was starting to create a decline in the participation of veterans in veterans organizations, and it also made the remaining veterans a little bit older, and the activities that they were doing a little bit less suited for younger members. So, 9/11 happens. Everything changed, an overcorrection sometimes. Military service was back popular. Patriots were everywhere. Everybody's waving a flag. But just like Vietnam, military service was an individual effort. You show up, you join up individually. This was after the era of conscription. So everybody who joins up is an all-volunteer army. So this is an individual choice to go into the military, individual choice to pick the job that you're going to be. And then you come back individually. And it's also, again, another protracted military experience, 20 years without a clear resolution. We had some tactical victories, some big celebrations. We got Bin Laden, we got Saddam Hussein, we got all those things, but peace didn't break out in Iraq, peace didn't break out in Afghanistan. So they had kind of an ambiguous ending. And also the people who were involved, society changed over this time since compared to Vietnam era. So your social life nowadays, a lot of people's social lives starts in their living room, not at the local watering hole. So we have way more things to keep ourselves entertained that we don't have to leave the house for. This changes the nature of our relationship with our veterans. Our veterans now, they have social media, they can talk to each other. They don't have to go out and go to the local local bar to talk to people. They don't go out to dances. Nobody dances anymore. Why is that? If you want to find a point where society started to break down, I think it's when we stop dancing. But the veterans of today, I guess I include myself among that as a global war on terror veteran. The experiences are individual. The appeal is individual as well. It's not you're going along to see all your buddies. You kind of have to collect your buddies to get them to go and do things. So the appeal that previous activities that the veterans organizations were a part of, it doesn't have the same appeal to modern veterans. And this is a trend nationwide. We also have fewer and fewer people who are part of the veteran community. It's probably about, instead of walking, just waiting on the sidewalk for 3 people to go by, one of them is going to be a veteran. It's a lot closer to 1 in 10. So we have fewer number of people, a more specific appeal of those types of experiences. So we see a downshift in in the participation. One clear evidence of this is the room we're sitting in right now. 20 years ago, this was a vibrant, active local bar. And now it's vibrant and active. We're still vibrant and active. But it's a historical society. And in some ways, it's good that we're able to reuse the space, but it also, we aren't serving the same populations. We're serving the same populations in a different way. Let's put it that way. So, what else can I say? So where is it there? So, one thing I want to emphasize. All right. One thing I want to emphasize. Local veterans, they can be put on a pedestal all day, but that only goes so far in a small town. We need everybody's participation. The veterans play a role, the family members of veterans play a role, the community plays a role. In Elizabethville, we have an active auxiliary and the Sons of the American Legion group helps out. It does a lot of things to raise money, provide manpower, put on activities and serve the community in ways that the veterans in the Legion aren't able to do at the same level of strength. So people whose father or grandfather or something like that had served, they're able to participate. The Ladies Auxiliary does a lot of activities. When we have patriotic events throughout town, Memorial Day ceremonies are probably the most prominent ones that we have right now. The Boy Scouts are a big part of that, right? The local community, when you guys come out and celebrate with the parade and with the ceremonies and those, that is a big portion of what makes the community vibrant and what gives meaning towards the veteran participation. So there's my thing. Oh. So I'm also going to point out what I have a mention of a few local heroes.
Just put that down and yell,
Okay.
talk loud.
I'll yell.
Okay.
My goodness.
Wow.
So
Turn it off.
I mentioned Jonas Swab. It's still
You
doing
have to
it.
turn it off.
Oh. Maybe that's the don't. No. Okay. So I mentioned Jonas Swab. Another member of the local business community that helped found or continue on a local business, Ned Weaver. Ned Weaver at one point one of the larger employers in town. Louis Krotzer, veteran, Pete DeSoto, veteran, Leon Dockey, Gordy Foster, Dave Shadle, Robert Straub, Wayne Klauser. A lot of these prominent local names had some sort of military involvement in their past, be it a little or a lot. And I like to think that they possibly helped, those experiences helped them when they came back and went into the civilian world, or civilian life, helped them make more of their local communities. So, all that said, does anybody have any questions? I know I went through a lot of stuff. Yes?
Just two comments.
Yes.
Both World War I related. At one time, if in World War II, if you were a farmer, you'd be exempt from the draft.
Yes.
And I know of one family that had a business, sold the business, bought a farm to keep their son out of the military, out of the draft.
I can believe that there were volunteers and there were also people who wanted to stay away from the volunteers.
Yeah.
I think the isolationist and anti-war sentiment is a lot more prominent. They say history is told by the victors,
Yeah.
but not everybody was really all gung ho about going.
And this actually occurred prior to the start of the war.
Mhm.
They saw the storm clouds in the horizon and said, we want to buy a farm.
There was a lot of effort before America's entry into World War I to stay out of World War I.
Yeah, oh, absolutely, absolutely. And the second thing, probably most of the people here are aware, Elizabethville had a World War I draft board on Market Street, South Market Street. And they had two draft boards in the county. Marilyn, I'm looking at you to confirm. One was in Steelton and one was in Elizabethville.
Okay. Yeah, so I didn't see a whole lot about the draft board stuff in my research, but I also wasn't looking for it in the same way that I could. So that's interesting that we were a center of that type.
Yeah, there are pictures floating around the draft board and young men mostly gathered around the draft board. Pursuing, yeah. I figure they were gonna, on the way to basic training or something.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Jonas Swobo's unit, there were a lot killed in that unit. He was one of the few that survived. I think it was like 300 men. It's back there on the wall and
Yes.
the story, but fortunately he survived.
Yeah, there was I forget, there was a battle that it's not as well known historically like Gettysburg or Bunker Hill or something like that, but there was definitely there were some casualties from his unit in the 200s and 10s.
Oh, just one other thing, you had a slide there, you didn't, where you talk about, showed Belgium and Amsterdam.
Oh yeah,
What?
so this was
Yeah, that one.
so this is the Flanders Field slide. So if you're familiar with in Flanders Field, the poppies grow beneath the crosses grow and grow. Flanders, I took this out because this is more general than local, but and I actually mentioned this during Memorial Day presentation one time. The poppies, the cornflower poppy, is actually a flower that grows in alkaline soil in a way that other wildflowers don't. That is not me.
The end of our sound system.
But is this something I shouldn't be talking about? But anyway, so that story, the poem, was written by somebody who was actually witnessing these red flowers grow up around the graves. The reason why the graves were a good place for those red flowers is because of the alkaline nature of the lime that they would pour over the freshly dug graves to keep the smell down. So that was I originally had that. I reused my slideshow. so yeah. So this area was roughly where the battles were that the 79th was fighting in. They were actually a little bit farther down into France in the Lorraine region.
And the First World War, the battle, that was sort of in a condensed area. It wasn't.
Yes.
Second World War was all over, widespread.
Mm-hmm.
First World War was more trench warfare.
Well, the First World War, the people that were going into the French World War, or the First World War, they expected to operate just like the Napoleonic and Civil War days of large formations, volley fire, Big people commanding people who were very, very poorly trained. And actually, the people who were shooting, they weren't very accurate in their shots. Because volley fire, you're not shooting at a point, you're just shooting in a general area. So that going from that to machine guns, chemical weapons, artillery that causes massive amounts of damage, they didn't adjust tactics very well, which is one of the reasons why things were so troubling for the participants and so deadly for so many casualties, because we're just kind of lined up like toy soldiers.
I'd just like to say, I just got my membership into the DAR. So
Okay.
through my fourth great-grandfather, Philip Christian Enders, I was able to join the DAR. And then I had a great-grandfather who fought in the Civil War, too. So all my genealogy pays off.
It sounds like it.
Yeah.
Yes, Barb.
Yes, when you brought up the slide, thank you for your service.
Mm-hmm.
Fred served in Vietnam. The Shore Patrol, when he landed in California, had to escort him so he'd be protected from civilians attacking him. And nobody ever thanked them for their service. And was it Representative Phillips?
Yeah.
Who had a program for veterans, and he asked like the World War II to stand, thank you for your service, Korea, and so on. And he got to Vietnam, and when Fred stood, I didn't get any tears in my eyes. It was the first time anybody ever thanked him for his service. So I appreciated that slide. It was so important.
Well,
Yellow ribbons, when
yes.
the people,
As
returned.
I'm sure Ben could probably tell you a very similar story, but it almost feels embarrassing from somebody from my generation to have people so eager to thank you for your service. When I was getting people thanking left and right, and, well, can I buy you a drink? Can I do this? Can I do that? Like I haven't done anything comparatively. So it's. For the younger generation, it feels like an overcorrection. For the older generation, it feels like it's not just justified, but it's overdue. So it's a challenge. It's a challenge for everybody to understand. It also represents another distinction between the generations, because they feel differently about those types of experiences.
If I'm even in Walmart and they have on their visor where they served, I say thank you for your service, and they just light up. And sometimes tell you the story that goes with that. But that is so important.
Well, I appreciate.
Thank you
the
for
comment.
having the slide.
Well, I'm glad I included it. Wouldn't have gotten that story otherwise. Yes.
When I got out of the service, I couldn't join the Legion or the vets.
Now you can.
I got out in '60. It was the Cold War.
Mm-hmm.
So in '19, we finally opened it up and I joined the Legion.
Okay. You can, now you have a flyer. You know where our meetings are. But yes, there was a bit of an exclusionary nature, which didn't make a big deal. When 1 out of every 3 people was a veteran, you could find a way to be a part of it. But as time went on, the American Legion restricted its membership to keep service during a period of war. So if you got out during '60, you weren't the Vietnam conflict, I believe, started officially in 1961, maybe, I'm not sure. Right around there. And a lot of those organizations, they didn't have, they for whatever reason, they excluded veterans of those interwar generations. Actually, Keith, our commander, Keith Lanker, he only got into to the American Legion through a technicality because of the Grenada conflict in 1983. So there were a lot of those things, and the American Legion rectified that in 2019, all the way up to 2019. But in 2019, it said veterans of all wars, and so anybody from 1941 all the way through the present.
When
So
did the draft end?
the draft ended in 1973. You didn't think I'd know the answer to that, did you?
Oh yeah, I figured you'd know. I didn't know.
Is there many women from town joined your service?
There are a few women in town that are. My wife's a Legionnaire. We have, I think, a handful of others. It's not as common for female veterans aren't as prominent in the local area. Actually, the Lycus Valley Children's Museum is actually run by a local veteran, a female retired Army chief or retired Navy chief. So who's also married to another local veteran.
Today,
Lisa did.
Yes, Lisa did.
today was the breakfast over at the Legion, the best in Halifax, and it was 90 veterans there
Wow.
over the whole area.
Well,
So, a lot of old guys and some young fellows.
everybody looking for a breakfast. Yeah, it's there are still very well attended activities. It's just a matter of figuring out what attracts the people from different generations.
And Kerwin said up in Wiccanisco they're going to have another one in November.
Hopefully, we can do something to advertise it and get an even better turnout. Any other questions? Well, thank you guys. Thank you so much for the opportunity to present today.